Hello, everybody. This is Nihar Chhaya. I'm an executive coach and host of the Executive Experience here on LinkedIn Live. I'm so excited to welcome my friend Eddie Turner. Eddie is an accomplished executive coach, leadership expert, a keynote speaker, a podcast host, a man of all trades, and really excited to get into a great discussion with him. And I want to welcome you, Eddie. Thank you so much for being here.
Nihar, thank you so much for having me. What a pleasure to be here with you.
Thank you, Eddie. And I know that you're busy, so I really appreciate you taking some time out of your busy schedule to join us here on LinkedIn Live. And I got to say, Eddie is, we've spoken, and I've got a chance to watch your show. Eddie's an accomplished podcast host, so I'm always learning from you about how to run these shows very well and make guests feel welcome. So thank you for being here, and I feel free to make this a very informative and interactive dialogue for us.
Well, it's not often I get a chance to sit on this side of the mic, so I get a chance to just relax. So
perfect. Excellent. Well, Ed, those of you that are just joining us, please feel free to type in the comments where you're from, hit the like button and share. Feel free if you like, so we can have some of the people in your network also tune in. And also feel free to type in some questions for Eddie and for myself, as we'll be taking them as well in this discussion. So Eddie, I wanted to, start at the beginning. You and I have spoken a lot about your career as a leadership advisor. And I know you've actually worked with many renowned companies before you came into the leadership space. Tell us a little bit about, your career and how you kind of got into your work today.
Sure. I spent years at corporations, but mostly as a tech guy. I was an IT, and still today at heart, I'm an IT geek, Nihar. Mm-hmm. I worked for companies like GE for about 10 years almost, and Deloitte, and it was Deloitte and Touche when I was there. It's just Deloitte now. They've changed the name. So Deloitte, I was at Quaker Oats, which is now Pepsi, Xerox, Apple, Dell. So experience at corporations that are your traditional corporations, but also at more of the tech. So it allowed me to see how the best organizations are run. And I often say that I've seen the best leading the best.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, those are great blue chip names. And did you find that there was a certain type of experience you had in working there that led you to take an interest in leadership and actually making it a profession for you?
Yes. In part, I think that I saw my whole paradigm shift change. Coming from the area that I grew up in and what I saw and things that I didn't necessarily know, I saw in action. Mm-hmm. So, for example, I didn't go and get a college education the way my peers did. Mm. As a tech guy, we didn't need a degree. We got certifications. And we would laugh at all of the folks getting these degrees because we were making more money than the folks with degrees. Right. And we didn't have the debt that goes with it. Yeah. Right. And in the late 90s, not only did you not need the degree as an IT person, but you would keep a job for a year or so, go down the street, and they would just throw gobs more money at you. And so life was good.
Yeah.
But I started to see that there was a lot of things that I had a feeling about, but I didn't have a way of explaining it. So, for example, how do you treat people? How do you treat employees? How should you run a team? I could see certain things and say, well, this doesn't look right. This doesn't feel right. Mm-hmm. And I could look at other leaders and say, oh, that's a leader. It just looks right, feels right. I can't, explain it with theory. Mm-hmm. But eventually I went back to school. And I went to school not for IT, but to study leadership and organization behavior.
Right.
Now I was exposed to theories.
Yes.
So here is what I see on display. And here I can actually explain it and decipher. And then, you start to look and learn about case studies where you take a GE that seemed like it was in every textbook that I was opening up, or every Harvard business case you were asked to read, something about a GE. So the company that you're a part of is held up as this example of what leadership is.
Yes.
So it was an interesting time. Certainly I worked there at the time initially when Jack Welch, every book was about Jack Welch, be a Jack Welch type of leader. So being in that environment, it really did cause me to think more deeply about what leadership is, what it looks like, and what it can be. add to that, going and getting specific training in that in my degree program, it put me on the path to where I am today.
That's fantastic. I think you touched on a really important point, which is that you can experience, leadership issues, and then you can learn the theory aspect of it. And sometimes I think we start with the theory first.
Yes.
So I had the probably that experience first, which was learning about it in business school and things like that. Although I will say, from my experience, I got into this space largely because I was confused about how organizational politics work. So I was working also in some of these bigger companies, and I was just always struggling with the idea of, just because you had the right answer doesn't mean you're going to get promoted or you're going to be successful as a leader, right? It's like there's a lot of other things there, and I'd say that I erred on the side of being more sensitive and maybe emotionally connected to colleagues, and struggled with the more of the, gung ho, I'm going to go get things done and drive results through people. And so I had my own kind of, self-doubt and issues that I dealt with in the workplace. And then I was like, one of the things that I'm realizing in my work is people are coming to me to talk about work issues, almost like a de facto therapist type of person. And I'm not a therapist, but it's like, because I like those issues.
But you played one on TV.
Yeah, exactly right. And I was like, well, is there a job to do this kind of stuff? And then I started learning from other psychologists that actually there's a workplace, psychology or behavioral aspect to these careers. Did you find that, well, what did you actually leave, to start your own thing?
So that would be many years later.
Mm-hmm.
During my time I went back to Northwestern University to get my education. And at Northwestern, there was a gentleman who came to be our guest lecturer one night. And I was fascinated by what he talked about. And he was the global head of learning and talent development at an executive search firm in Chicago, which was at the time the number one. There were 6 big ones, and this was number one at the time. And he took me under his wing. He taught me the business of learning and talent development. But it would be from the time I finished my degree program, about 4 or 5 years before I would actually go into this line of work. And it didn't happen until I left Chicago, ended up in Houston.
Okay. Right.
And someone said to me at work, they said, you're really a good coach. You should become an official coach. And I laughed at them.
Yeah.
Me, a coach? I'm not a coach. But later on, obviously, I went in that direction. And what I now realize, Nihar, is that the first 20 years of my career were the setup for the next 20. Because I always felt comfortable in the executive space because I'd always worked in the executive space. I'd always worked with the chief officers, but it was as an IT professional.
Yes.
I was very comfortable coaching executives because even though I never coached them on leadership, I coached them on technology. But I was comfortable with the space. And because of my time around executives, I discovered what I call the rhythm of leadership. There's a rhythm, there's a cadence that happens when you enter into that executive space. I understand that, and I knew how to model that, I guess, if you can say. And it was one of those things that I was talking about before where I kind of had figured certain things out. I didn't know how to necessarily articulate them. But now combining my anecdotal experience with the empirical knowledge that comes from, studies, formal studies, I now could combine both of those. And it was just a very nice transition to putting that together and doing the coaching work that you and I are doing today.
Yeah. So that's a great point, that you model something that made them probably feel very comfortable working with you, like the experience you had working in those kind of companies at the C-level, because so much, as in our world, so much is chemistry, right? We have these chemistry meetings to you audition for coaching engagements and you go up against 2 or 3 other coaches. And, you might have the best resume in the world, but the reality is that executive has to feel comfortable around you and feel like you're credible enough to understand their world, that you aren't kind of just starting from scratch. And I think that that's a big mistake that a lot of new coaches go through. Not a mistake, but like a discouraging aspect to when they go to a coaching certification program or something like that, and they get out there in the real world, they're thinking, well, hey, I know how to coach. How come I'm not getting coaching assignments? But I think a lot of it has to do, like you said, the first 10 years of your career or whatever that might be sets you up for success because you know their world and you also kind of can walk the talk.
No question about it. I'm a part of a coaching. I'm a part of a couple of different coaching programs, but one of the programs I'm affiliated with right now, I did something that I normally don't do, which is I helped on the sales end of the people that would end up in the program. And one of the individuals who I spoke to, he said to me, how will this make my business better?
Mm-hmm.
He said, I got trained as a coach 5 years ago, and I've gone back to hanging drywall. I couldn't get any clients.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt bad for him.
Yeah.
But what I said to him is coaching schools teach us coaching skills. It teaches how to be a coach. I don't know of any that teach you how to run a business.
Right.
Much like even when we go to a 4-year institution, most of the time we're getting an education. We're getting a degree. We are not told how to go run a business. Mm-hmm. In some cases, we aren't even told how to operate inside of a business.
Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
We have to learn that later on. And so the same is true. So for coaches, it's incumbent upon all of us to learn our craft, learn our skills, and apply them well. Mm-hmm. But then running a business is a wholly distinct skill set that we must also gain. And that's what people like you with an MBA do well at. I don't have an MBA.
Well, to be honest with you, I'm not sure that the MBA taught me anything that I used until later on, because I think I'm a big believer, like you, of practical experience makes it all come together. I knew the theory, but it really, and by the way, I think I've learned as I've gotten older that school is one of those things where, particularly I think the way schools are set up here in America is it's so competitive where you just want to do well in the test and you want to get out of there, and I'm not sure I even learned a lot when I was in school. I took them with me, and then I learned as I got out there in the real world. And you're right, I'm saddled with a lot of debt as a result. But I want to say the one thing that I also think is really interesting about you, and probably my experience as well, is because there's so many people that go to coaching schools and want to kind of get a shingle and be a coach. I'm sure you probably see this. There's so few people that actually make it a full-time thing. Because it takes not just, I think, like you said, business skills, but a real commitment, I think, to saying that, I'm going to build something out of this, like a brand, and I'm going to create some kind of value in a very saturated marketplace. And so what did you find for yourself that was, that helped you kind of differentiate and really make this a viable thing for the long term for you?
Interestingly, when I decided to go back to school as an adult, my very first night at Northwestern University, they brought back an alumna who had just released her new book.
Mm-hmm.
Her name was Catherine Caputa.
Mm.
I'd never heard of her, obviously, but her book was You Are a Brand.
Mm.
Catherine Caputa gave all of us a signed copy of her book that night. And that was the beginning of my 4-year program. That was the first time the idea of turning myself into a brand was presented to me.
Mm-hmm.
I would not have thought about brand building had it not been for Catherine Caputa.
Wow.
Along the way, other resources have come about that have helped me to appreciate the power of branding.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, you and I are members of the esteemed Marshall Goldsmith MG100 coaches. Right. And Marshall always talks about the importance of that. Mm-hmm. And it really is true, because the only way we're going to stand out is to be known.
Mm-hmm.
And to be known for doing something, but to be known for doing it at a level of excellence, to where people want it. Because you can also be known for nefarious reasons, obviously. We want to be that guy, that coach, right? So do you have raving fans?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Are people willing to go on record and say what you've done, how you've changed their life? And that's why we put the first emphasis on being a great coach.
Mm-hmm.
Running the business is important. And part of that will start to become intertwined and becomes a part of your building of your brand, building of your business.
Yeah. Yeah. So many of us, I know for myself, I can't speak for you, but I feel like we go into coaching because we love helping other people, and we love really on a one-on-one kind of basis. Right. And we're not just maybe consulting them on a strategy problem. We're actually getting really deep in those individualistic, emotional type of things, that for us to all of a sudden then talk about ourselves and market ourselves, and it just feels very icky. But I think what we found, and you're absolutely right, Marshall talks about this a lot as well, is that there's a way to be authentic about it, and to really position yourself in a way that you feel good about it, and you also recognize that people really want your help. And if you can make that connection, and to a certain extent have that social proof, like you and I have in terms of the programs we've gone to and the clients we've had, raving fans, as you said, then I think ultimately, why worry so much about it? It's another relationship you can build.
Yes, because typically when people are satisfied, they don't mind talking about it, right? If you have to ask, that in some cases people are shy, but usually if we have to ask, that means they really weren't as excited. Mm-hmm. They really weren't as pleased. And you would say, okay, well, what can I do better? Because I really want to get better, right?
Yes.
But I think even before meeting with Marshall, one of the gentlemen who really had a profound impact on me is because I actually am an introvert. I actually am very shy.
Me too.
And so I don't like to be public. But the gentleman who took me under his wing when I decided to become a professional speaker, his name is Tim Durkin. Tim Durkin said to me, you can't be the world's best kept secret.
I like that.
And that advice added to this whole branding concept.
Yeah.
It made me realize that, yes, especially as an entrepreneur, right? We have to, we're the product. So if we're out of sight, we're out of mind. Buyers are not going to come to us. Folks see something that you and I have posted. They see us talking now and they go, wow, maybe I should call Nihar.
Right.
Or I read this article that Nihar just wrote in Harvard Business Review. By the way, I love that last article you wrote. They say, wow, that's the coach I want. Now, these other coaches that I just got put, you talked about the vetting process. When you and I are inside of an organization, they're sitting 3 resumes down, sometimes 4. Mm-hmm. And I can look up Nihar, and I see Nihar's written for Forbes. He's written for Harvard Business Review. Nihar's got a show. I can actually get a sense of what it's like to be coached by Nihar. But, here's this guy. Here's that one, that individual, that coach, that lady, right? I don't know anything about them.
Right.
I can't get a sense of what it's like. If I've got to throw a dart and take a chance, I'm going to take a chance on the one I can see, the one I can read about. At least I have a sense of where he's at.
Yeah, and also there's a sense that somebody else took a bet on that person. So, for instance, like I came across your podcast way before I even met you in MG100, and it was like a way to see into what it's like to know you. And so if I'm looking for a coach, I'm going to already know what it's like to talk to you, how do I feel in your presence? And also the guests that you've had telling me that, wow, they really respect him so much that they want to be on his show as well. And so I think you're absolutely right. And one thing you just said about, because I'm introverted as well. In other words, I definitely need my time to recharge and get away. One thing that our friend Dory Clark from MG100, I think.
Oh, I love Dory.
Yeah, one thing that she talks a lot about is that the best way to go into a social setting like a conference, something like that, and not have to deal with the shyness and stuff is be the speaker, because they're going to come to you and you don't have to do that whole weird small talk thing, right? And so, and because I think she's even told me that she's an introvert, and who would have thought, right? People like you, Dory, you're so prolific with your presentations and your speaking. You're out there traveling the world on stages. But the reality is that you are probably really effective at it because of the introversion, because you're not necessarily just talking to talk. You're actually thinking before you talk, and and maybe you put a lot of preparation into those things before you even get on. Does that resonate at all with you, or?
Oh, totally.
Yeah,
totally. Plus, anything that Dory says, I'm on board anyway.
Yeah, she's a great master.
Oh, she is.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to ask you, Eddie, so what are you working on these days, and how can people kind of get to know you and get to know your business? I know that First of all, I want to tell those of you on the line here, please feel free to follow Eddie on LinkedIn if you haven't followed him yet. I actually got a chance to see your really great book, 140 Simple Messages for Emerging Leaders. Guys, pick that up as well on Amazon if you want. This is actually really great. I like the fact that you have a journal kind of set up there where you can see these great messages from Eddie, and you can kind of reflect on what they're about for yourself. And also, I think those of you that are interested in Eddie, Eddie, what's your website? Is it eddieturnerllc.com?
Yes, simply go to askeddieturner.com and that'll redirect you to everywhere that we've got the things you're describing. Thank you for sharing that.
Absolutely. So what kinds of coaching engagements would you say are your favorite? Do you have any kind of ones that really light you up, or do they all kind of bring their own special joy to you?
That's an interesting question. I don't know that I could say I have a favorite. I can tell you I love the diversity of the clients I coach. Mm-hmm. I have executives I coach in other countries. I have executives I coach, obviously, here in the States. I enjoy the diversity. Mm-hmm. And there's a different level, obviously, of engagement and challenge that comes with coaching people at a high level.
Yes.
But then I have clients I coach at universities. Mm-hmm. And I always say, I love working with these young people. I mean, they give me hope for the future. I absolutely love working with them. And that can be anyone as young as 18 years old to someone who's probably in their mid 30s working on their PhD.
Wow.
And I get great joy from doing that because, as you mentioned earlier, obviously as coaches, at the end of the day, we just love helping people.
Yeah.
We love seeing people become the next best version of themselves.
Mm-hmm. Well, let me ask you a question on that, because I'm very intrigued. My wife is a teacher, and so she's always said to me that, because I don't really coach a lot of people who are millennials yet. Mostly they're, kind of Gen X or older. But every now and then, I'm intrigued by the stories of a lot of these younger generations. And she says, you got to spend more time with some of these younger folks, which she's always around, because like you said, they're the future. They have a bright view on where the world is going. I feel like we need more of that, particularly in this time that we're living in. And I was curious, like when you're coaching folks that maybe aren't so immersed in a company culture where, a lot of our coaching, executive coaching, is like, okay, what's the competency models and the criteria for you to work within? But you're dealing with an open, kind of kimono, if you will. It's probably a bad word, but the open kind of very fresh perspective. Like, I can do anything when I'm 20 years old. How do you frame the coaching? Like, what do you help them with, and how do you get them to think in a way that's successful for them?
Number one, nurture the enthusiasm. Mm-hmm. We want them to feel like they can conquer the world and not lose that. Sometimes when we come out of institutions of higher learning, we get in that corporate mode where you must fit in this box.
Right.
You must act this way. And we lose some of that, I can do anything, I can conquer the world, right?
Yeah.
In some ways, we reward conformity
mm-hmm.
in our corporations.
Absolutely right.
And we need that, but we don't. We need a degree of still wanting to be independent, wanting to be innovative, thinking out of the box, but get back in it. Right? I have a client I'm dealing with about that right now. A brilliant engineer. Mm. She is a brilliant engineer. And oh my, the grief she's taken, right? So we want to reward people for thinking. And so obviously as a coach, we want to continue to nurture that ability for them to remove limiting beliefs, remove limitations, and sometimes just dream big. Mm-hmm. What can you do and what will you do? And helping them not lose that. So that's why I say nurturing that, I think, is a big part of it. The next part, I think, is looking at what kind of leader can they be. Mm-hmm. And this becomes important because obviously as we look around the world around us, the world is hungering for good leadership.
Yes.
And on the college campus, they start to exercise it in many ways. And that could be from a civic group that's on campus. Mm-hmm. I remember sitting there having a little coffee, and a couple of young gentlemen, they started talking at the table next to me. And they were excited about their political persuasion. Mm-hmm. And they said, we're the minority on this campus, but here's what we're going to do. Here's what we do. And this is why this matters. Now, I don't have to agree with their political point of view,
Right.
but I loved their enthusiasm.
Mm.
I love the fact that they were mobilizing to get other like-minded people like them to carry out the agenda of their party.
Yes.
Right? I love that. And so helping people to be leaders in whatever way they want to lead, I think is important. And then when they get into corporations, then they're able to carry that on. Whereas if they are now trying to learn leadership in corporations, the research from Jim Kouzes and Barry Posner says they aren't going to get any formal leadership training for 10 years.
Right.
On average.
Yeah. And what an effect that has on the people that work for them.
Yes. Yes. And then that's why you and I have jobs as executive coaches.
Exactly. I love your coaching style because it's very motivational. You know, it's sometimes I find that I've gotten so caught up in coaching leaders around what they need to conform to, like you said, that we do sometimes forget what is possible, you know? And I love that you start with that perspective and then actually open up your opportunities to coach people maybe who are just trying to get into that world, because they'll be the ones that transform the next generation of corporate America.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Eddie, I want to ask you, our friend Michael Bungay Stanier has a really great, your best question or your favorite question, right? And I always, I love that. And I love talking to coaches like you. So I was curious, do you have like a really good question that you ask your clients, or something that you found was like really revealed a lot of aha kind of moments for your clients?
It's interesting you would ask me that. So the answer is no. But I there's a program I teach, and I taught a program in another area this morning of coaching. And in this particular program, I always quote Michael. Michael doesn't know this yet, but Michael, I think I'm helping you sell more books every time I teach this program. But not that he needs my help. I think the last time we talked, he sold like 500,000 or 600,000 copies. Yeah. And I forgot how many languages it's in, like 20 or something. But so Michael's question I talk about a lot. Great, famous question. But Michael's question in his book is written for people who are coaching as managers inside of organizations. And so we would want them to have that kind of assistance. The coaching that you and I are doing, especially guided through the ICF kind of principles, means that we don't necessarily go in with that set question laid out in many cases. I decided I want to be the best coach in the world. And so I went to the number one woman. You and I with Marshall, he's the number one male in the world. I went to Marsha Reynolds. Yeah. And Marsha Reynolds, number one female, and she became my coach. And she taught me to use the power of reflective listening. And so when using the power of reflective listening, the next question, she says, Eddie, get out of your head.
Yeah.
If you're thinking about what the next question is, you are not present with the client. So she taught me, of course, the power of presence, getting out of my head. And so truly being with the client. And so that question comes to me in that moment.
Yes. I love that.
I had a situation with an executive a couple of weeks ago. Went through this whole period. And right in the middle of the session, I asked her a series of questions. And normally as coaches, we do it one at a time. But in this case, I did several. And at the end of the session, I just was reviewing, what's the most important thing you learned, whatever. And she said, yeah, but what were those questions you asked me in the middle? Those were powerful. I need to write those down. I said, I don't know what I asked you. I honestly couldn't remember what I asked her, right? I asked her what I needed to ask her in that moment. And so, yeah, so I don't necessarily, it's whatever the client has presented, it's coming out of me at that moment in time.
Yeah, I love that. And, one of the things that I think you and I both, learned in ICF and those kinds of models, which I think are very important, is you're not just asking questions for yourself. You're asking questions to help them discover something further. So many mistakes I think I've seen leaders do when they're trying to coach their direct reports is they're really just asking information gathering questions. They're not really asking questions to increase the insight, or to help the person advance their span of observation or see something that they didn't see before. But a lot of that stuff, as you said, only can come from a place of genuine curiosity. It can't come from a set of pre-planned questions.
Yes.
And I'm with you completely on getting out of your head. I think that is the most important tool for coaches, particularly when we're working with very powerful people.
Yes.
Because it's always, there's always a little bit in the back of my head that like, well, am I being too easy on this person? Should I be a little bit more challenging to them? Am I earning my keep? It's so ridiculous because as a coach, you're supposed to never make it about you. But it is a business as well. So we always think about that.
It's always hard because we you and I come from consulting backgrounds.
Yes.
And we're paid to have the right answer.
Yes.
We're paid to come in with this brilliant solution, right? Because that's why you hired me.
That's right.
But as the coach, that's not what we're there for.
Yeah.
Right. Now we're there to help you come up with that brilliant solution.
Exactly right.
And so it is a shift. So sometimes in the back of our mind, we may feel like maybe I didn't give as much as I could have. Mm-hmm. And I remember asking Marsha about that one day. She said something very powerful. She said, your clients don't need you to fix them. Mm-hmm. Sometimes they just need you to witness them.
I like that.
And so sometimes when we are sitting there and we've created that environment that we create, that sacred space, I call it, as a coach, and we show up as truly present for them the way we should, and we turn it on our tools of listening, intentional listening at all 4 levels, preferably level 4. And when we are using our questions and our other tools, when we do that well, but sometimes it's just listening.
Yeah, it's so true.
They witness them. That's the biggest tool we give them.
Yes, I agree completely. I had a client just last week where he just kind of talked through the whole session. I barely said anything. And at the end, I typically ask, so what were some of your takeaways from today? And he thought it was, really enlightening for him. And I just felt like, wow, this guy, what he really needed to do was just talk it through. He needed to process it out verbally because he's quite introverted as well. I think it was just sitting in his head and he's in a situation where he can't really talk to people around him because it's a little bit too vulnerable to kind of process those things in public. But you're absolutely right. Like you create the environment for them to learn, even if that involves you just witnessing it. And it's I love that.
Absolutely.
Well, Eddie, I've taken you a little bit over. I know that you're busy here. I appreciate your time so much. We got to have you back because, I could talk to you forever. And I wanted to just, let everybody know here to, again, follow Eddie. Feel free to reach out to askeddieturner.com.
Yes.
Yep. And give a listen to Eddie's podcast, the Keep Leading podcast. It's a great opportunity to hear from him and also some great guests that he brings on all the time. So with that, Eddie, thank you so much. Any final words or anything that you'd like to share with the audience?
No, I appreciate you having me on. It's so good to catch up with you, Nihar. And I would encourage folks to continue to keep up with your work as well, because you're doing some outstanding work and putting great content out there for us all to learn from so that we can keep leading.
Thank you so much, Eddie. I appreciate it. Well, have a great rest of your day and we'll talk again soon.
You too.
All right. Bye-bye.